We make big and good, bigger and better. You got to call a spade a spade. I think arrogance and hubris really kills in the end.
What did you learn about leading from Citibank and KKR?
I think it's Citi and Solomon, the biggest thing that I learned at least was that you need to have a fairly high degree of flexibility as a person. Like today when you go hire people, they want to just be in iBanking, just in sales and trading or whatever. Those days you were hired as a management associate and then you were blessed with a job and you did what you had to do. You had to work very hard and then you could get picked up and be transferred somewhere else and somewhere else. You got to be flexible with your careers. You got to move along as you are asked to move. Obviously learn along the way. When we merged with Solomon, I went to work on the Solomon platform, 180-degree different culture and values. So again, one had to be flexible to adjust to that because, well, thank God I had the job after the merger. But then you had to be flexible and be productive on that platform. And then of course I got the offer to be the CEO for Citigroup in India. It was flexibility at every stage, but being driven by an ethos that, look, I think what's happening for the good, and I'm learning a lot and I'm growing. And my career is growing. When you manage people yourself, you try to instill into them, become good leaders. I think you need to have a fairly high degree of flexibility while you learn along the way. I started KKR in India, as you know, the office here, a well-established, blue chip, storied firm. Basically, you start from scratch. Okay? You're not an investor, you're a so-called banker, probably a salesman in their language. And they trusted you with a massive amount of empowerment to start a brand new business in a brand new country. And that, as you know, for private equity and folks like Henry and George, that's a massive leap of faith. So the second thing you learn is empowering and trusting. They found me, I'm sure, through some folks. We met in Davos a couple of times. That trust and empowerment was, I think, a big learning for me that when I build teams in turn, if you don't trust them and don't give them the space to be empowered, then frankly, you don't create good leaders. And I think in both Citi and KKR, one thing was why I think I did well was because you were empowered and you felt like an entrepreneur within an institutional setup, which is quite unique. So, we can say, we have a lot of energy, we did a lot of things, but we did it because we felt like entrepreneurs, because you enjoyed that trust and you could hence lead your people, but still you're within a pretty risk-free institutional framework, okay?
Sanjay, how does a leader truly become a leader of people?
To get the people to believe in you, believe in the cause and believe in a strategy, but execute like hell and execute by leading from the front. Second, you build a core team, but not too close. The thing I notice nowadays is that people want loyalty. I was never a believer of loyalty. I was assuming that loyalty will come because of the actions we take and how we trust them and hopefully forgive them when they make mistakes and also celebrate their successes. So you create a following. You have to be sort of a little bit generous with them. Generous when they make mistakes. And I think generous when you also celebrate. And I think generous in letting them fail and then taking some kind of collective responsibility. But ultimately at the end of it, it's your hard work, your reaching out and kind of having a larger circle rather than a small circle. Nowadays, what I also see is people change people when they move. They say, this guy was his guy, let's change him. I don't think I remember having done that either when I came as CEO of Citigroup in India. I don't think I changed a single direct report. And of course at KKR, I built it from scratch.
What do you think are the three most defining problems that leaders should solve for in the coming decade?
So I think one is they have to be concerned if they're running multinational organizations cross-border. I think you have to worry about geopolitics. I think the second one is that the people after pandemic have gotten pretty disengaged in a way. At least I notice it because I'm just the reverse kind of guy. I think the leader's second problem in this environment is going to be to re-engage with the people. And how do you also respect their newfound enthusiasm of having a hybrid work culture? I think the third one, I would say every business, something will come and disrupt, hearing of things like AI, green revolution and net zero, which itself is a bit of a challenge, right?
Having invested in many Indian entrepreneurs, how do you feel Indian entrepreneurs can face giant companies?
Competence is definitely one of them. The second one is that they have to stay nimble, to adjust to competition, to pivoting strategies if something is not going well. Third, they have to build big companies. I mean, the fact is, at least our experiences, that we make big and good, bigger and better. Build scale, okay, with inherent productivity. Then finally find a moat or a niche which can not directly head on go into these giant companies. So we have to give them the right messages, give them the right encouragement, and actually leave them pretty independent.
How would Sanjay Nayar measure the CEO of today on success?
I think this good CEO is one who leaves a really sustainable organization behind, is really able to have a very tangible set of culture and values. And if that culture and value is all about himself, then I think it's not great. If there is a real set of culture and values that are tangible. The other thing is that obviously he's got to create value for shareholders, but the beauty is that if he's not there or the investor has left, exited, how does the longevity of the organization go on, and does it get into stronger hands and better hands, and the share value just doesn't correct for the sake of it. So again, depends upon how solid an organization and business has he or she built.
What do you feel the boards of today are not getting right?
I think the leaders of the board are not inviting enough voices. They sort of create a very collaborative culture, and sometimes too much collaboration suppresses contradictions. We're not seeing enough of contradictory voices. I think secondly, the boards aren't really driving succession planning the way they should. Because when I compare it to what the two firms I come from, at KKR and Citi, I mean, succession planning was ingrained in every 6-month review.
In promoter-led companies which are run by professionals, how should promoters lead?
Yeah, we've had a couple of instances. I think the promoter, if he's going to take a bit of backseat and bring in a professional, he has to give space to the CEO. And anyway, when we find a CEO, it is done alongside the promoter agreeing with it. Otherwise, the CEO is destined to fail. The second thing is that he's got to take on the role from operations to a bit more of advisory capacity. Third, we found a successful example where he takes on the role of just mentoring the CEO and a couple of the key executives. Fourth is the promoter can get busy with handling public affairs, corporate relations, government. The worst is when the promoter says, look, I told you this would not happen, and this is exactly what is wrong. Then it's a bit of a backlash. But I think it's a very tricky relationship.
Next part to that question, what's the best way for CEOs to manage or lead in a promoter-led company?
So I think for the CEO, my view is he's got to be spiritually quite strong about this, because he's going to get his 4-5% take, right? He's going to get his ESOPs. Goals are very clear because they're set by the private equity firm or the board. He's got to know that I'm just going to work for the results, okay? And he will have to give adequate respect to the promoter and literally treat him like an executive chairman, even if he's not. If the CEO is going to be hung up on, I did this, my success only attribute to me, then he's not going to work with the promoter. Look, the promoter built the business in 4 decades, yeah. So, you can't ignore his wisdom and his knowledge. So I think the CEO has to respect what the promoter is in a way giving him on a platter. Engage with him constructively and give him the respect more openly rather than in closed door.
You've managed many prima donnas. How does a leader manage great minds?
Firstly, somehow again through your own demonstration, you have to, I think, make the bright minds sit together. And you'll be surprised that even if you have 3-4 bright minds, if they collaborate and again feel secure that I'm able to contribute ideas, and it'll only help the cause of the firm as a whole. The problem is that bright minds normally don't accept other bright minds' ideas. Other one I found pretty useful in my experience of 14-15 years was at a private equity firm was that celebrate the successes together. But that is something that I think lets them their hair down and they get to know each other much better. When they get to trust each other better, then extends into companionship, and then they go out on their own, that's even better.
How should CEOs give feedback to their leaders?
The most difficult thing is to give feedback to prima donnas. I would actually get deflated even before I start giving the feedback. Constant informal feedback makes life much easier when you come to the mid-year reviews or the annual reviews. Because sometimes, they don't listen. You give them only twice a year or once a year feedback. Sometimes the prima donnas cannot adjust. And the biggest feedback would be, oh, I never knew this. You never told me this before. Second, I think one is to, with the really high-flying guys, and if you value them, I think you have to give them a chance to speak in the feedback session. You do this, twice a year formally, 6 times a year informally, every day in the corridor. I think it sort of calms everybody down, yeah.
3 simple words that describe Sanjay's leadership style.
Intense execution. Reaching out to the people, as I said earlier. Again, I go out of my way to just make sure that they are taken care of.
What's been the most useful leadership advice you ever received? Who did it come from? What did they tell you?
First and foremost, I think the best came from Henry Kravis. He's an ultimate gentleman, ultimate investor. But I think one of the best things he taught is that you've got to call a bad news, and you got to call it first. All of us have a habit of only saying how good everything is and bring out the bad news a bit later. I think that is a huge thing. And you do it in front of your people and show that you're vulnerable. I think increases your leadership. You got to really believe and create, even in your microcosm, a real good set of culture and values, whatever they are, which are relevant to your area. You really got to carry the culture yourself. I think Henry taught me and my entire team in India that arrogance is the last thing you want.
Do you have a favorite failure? What did you learn from it?
When we had a credit crisis in our NBFC, I was the CEO for the whole firm. I had a partner working on the NBFC, and we were always trading off between taking the calls early versus taking the bad news later. And you struggle between leaving someone independent to do it, or you override him. And I think delayed that by maybe 6-7 months. You got to call a spade a spade. And look, everything worked out very well after that. It's just that we delayed to recognize the mistakes we had made, and we could have acted earlier. If you got to make a change, you got to make it quickly, but you got to do it. You will admit to it. You got to make the change, and then you got to move on.
Sanjay's proudest moment in his career.
I was in Chennai branch, and our chairman, John Reed, in those days used to announce a chairman's award. There were about 5 awards only in a huge firm like Citigroup. One day I get a call that I've got the chairman's award, so I'll have to be present in New York to receive it. So it was a full 24-carat gold watch, and it was for the best customer service award. So for whatever reason, I got the best customer service award because I used to be in the trenches, I think in the Chennai branch. But a chairman's award was a big deal in those days, and 5-6 guys would get it.
What's the one thing that you've learned as an investor about human beings and people?
They're always optimistic, always bullish. There's always a J curve, and you just have to heavily discount it in investing, right? You just cannot believe in the story somebody is giving you. You have to be quite cynical about it.
Your proudest moment that made Sanjay feel that his leadership really made a difference in a crisis?
There was the whole 2008 crisis. At that time, all foreign banks were quite shaken up. To really go out there to our consumer bank customers. We had to go to our corporate bank customers. My leadership there in stepping up with key corporate clients, talking with my consumer bank head, going out with some real statements, obviously backed by New York. And then I think I needed the backing of the government as well and the RBI, which I got, again, because of my relationship with them. I think we got some good backing. I think we stepped up, came out of that in the Indian franchise pretty untouched.
How does Sanjay run an effective meeting?
Get all the ideas on the table and then take a decision quickly.
Sanjay is always on the move, city after city, deal after deal. What drives Sanjay Nayar?
I think his lack of hobbies, Seriously. I promised my family every birthday is okay, I'll pick up some hobby. My only hobby is either go swim, play tennis, go for a walk. That's all sports and exercise. I think I got to pick up a hobby, but I can't sit idle. So I think it's the lack of hobbies, unable to sit idle, want to be in the flow of things, and then everything falls into place. So
who or what is inspiring you right now and why?
Right now, I'm fully inspired by Falguni, absolutely. The way she's working day to day, totally driven, carrying the family along, carrying the 2 kids along, and this huge organization that they're building. Besides having built the business, which she gets a lot of credit for, I'm just inspired the way she's running it day to day.
Who's been the greatest influence on your journey as a banker and an investor?
In banking was, a vice chairman in those days, Victor Menezes, obviously. Fantastic gentleman. One could go to him and talk about issues, and he would tell you in a very simplistic way what the basic answers were. When I was getting the CEO job here, I went to him and I said, why am I leaving Wall Street and going back to India? And he said, because this is the best job you'll ever do. Sane advice, but very simple. He said, you will never work any other place after the CEO job in India. And I said, exactly what happened. And then, of course, with Henry Kravis at KKR, it's been just outstanding relationship at a personal level, at an institutional level.
If legacy was a person, it would be Dash.
I would say Deepak Parekh. He's built a pretty great legacy. If you just see the way he's done it for 5 decades or whatever, built a brand that is all-encompassing, so many verticals rather well. And I think the one thing that stands out is that he's again got that same set of culture and values transgressing across all HDFC verticals, and that's cross-collaboration, preserving the brand, nothing should get tarnished. I mean, these things matter, and that's why you leave such a rich legacy behind.
If you could trade places with anyone in any industry right now, who would it be and why?
Jamie Dimon.
Name a leader from a different space that Sanjay looks up to.
Mukesh Ambani's building is quite something, right? Just the way they are building so many verticals and now new technologies, new energy systems, it's just fantastic. They think about it and they execute relentlessly and they build scale.
Most people get nervous around Sanjay Nayar, but what does Sanjay get nervous about?
I get nervous about somehow ending up overcommitting.
If you were in my seat, had the option to put somebody in that seat, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Yeah, Elon Musk, he run for the presidency of the United States. I think it makes a lot of sense. He should actually.
Sanjay, if you had a gigantic billboard out there, what would that message be to millions and why?
Yeah, I would put a billboard that just says, like you say nowadays, smoking kills. I would say arrogance kills. I think arrogance and hubris really kills in the end.
One thing you've learned never to do as a CEO.
Shout.
One thing you've learned always to do as a CEO.
Empathize.
The hardest thing about being a CEO is
handling different views and taking a decision.
One thing that is unique to you as a deal maker.
Work from the gut, takes a risk, and then try to convince the system.
A job offer you regret not taking.
Kotak Mahindra Bank, 1992.
What was the job?
You can't recall that.
Okay. Balance sheet and cash flows, or the human being behind the numbers? What does Sanjay bet on more?
The founder, the human being for sure.
The first thing Sanjay does in the morning, the last thing he does at night.
Morning, I make my bed tea and I try and have it with my mom every morning. And last thing I do at night is just watch the news. I sleep pretty early, so I just watch whatever's coming on CNBC.
Henry Kravis in one word.
Very, very generous human being.
George Roberts in one word.
Deep thinker, reads everything.
What's been on your to-do list for the longest time?
Learn playing piano.
Sanjay's most prized possession is?
Silly Rolex watch, but frankly, it's 24 years old.
City India or KKR, the tougher job?
KKR India.
Convincing the global IC of KKR or influencing the Ministry of Finance? What's the easier job?
Convincing IC is easier.
If you could eliminate one thing from your workday, what would it be?
I do still 400 emails a day, which I think I got to stop. Because frankly, a lot of them are not even warranting a response and I end up responding to everything.
What do you imagine employees or people would have gossiped about you?
Workaholic, talks very fast.
One private equity investor you really admire?
I think I look back and I think Ashish Dhawan was probably one of the best over the years.
Your favorite workday time waster?
Going to Wellington, sitting and having an egg sandwich and a mint tea every day.
Tennis lessons with Roger Federer or opposite the buyout table with Henry Kravis?
Roger Federer any day.
With entrepreneurs, bankers and investors in the Nayar family, what does it discuss most at the dinner table?
Well, not necessarily dinner, but when we do, my family wants my view on some of the issues they're facing in their business, and when I give it to them, they don't like them. So then I always argue with them that why do you ask for my advice? But then I see them implementing it later on, which is good.
In one sentence, Sanjay's legacy will be?
42 years of working in 2 organizations as an employee. Hopefully building an umbrella of 2-3 funds and really build high-class teams, institutionalize, copy shamelessly from my KKR career in terms of all the learnings that I've got there, empower the organization, culture and values.
Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah.
So talk about this.
Yeah, this is...
That's why I agreed to you when you said leadership.
Yeah.
Then I felt that time. Let me just think about this. You'll come back later. Come back later. I was going to say my nap, but I say I can't eliminate my afternoon nap,